stumble. I told you guys this was my first live stream and that if I stumble, please forgive that. And then I realized that I was on mute, so you couldn't hear any of that. So that was my first stumble for this live stream. So welcome, guys. Welcome, everybody. This is my very first live stream, and I'm glad you're here today. While we get started, why doesn't everybody tell me where they're joining us from? Today we'll be talking about the Dawes Act and the making of the $5 Indian. This, I'm hoping, will be a new topic for most here. Let's do a poll. If you could tell me where you're coming from. Got somebody from Portland, awesome. I expect a bunch of Oregonians here since I'm an Oregonian, and that my friends and family are probably going to be joining, as well as possibly some of my students. Hello, Heather from Grants Pass. Glad you guys are here today. And looks like this is going to be a brand new topic for everybody that voted. Awesome. So our agenda today is to talk about what exactly is the Dawes Act, and then what are the effects of the Dawes Act, as well as talking about what is a $5 Indian. So we got to understand what the Dawes Act is in order to understand what a $5 Indian is and why it matters. And then at the end, I'll have a Q&A for anybody that is interested. So what was the Dawes Act? First off, the Dawes Act was this act by the US government basically saying that instead of the Native Americans owning the land communally as an entire tribe, the land was going to be split up so that each individual Native American got their own little plot of land. Basically, this very white version of what land ownership should be like. Here is actually directly from the Dawes Act. It says, an act to provide for the allotment of lands in severalty to Indians on the various reservations and extend the protection of the laws of the United States and the territories over the Indians and for other purposes. So let's kind of break that down, what that means, the allotment of lands in severalty to Indians, as well as extending those protections of the laws of the United States. So first, anybody here own any land? Anybody own a home, a condo, anything like that? Possibly soon. Awesome. That's great. Well, according to the Native American philosophy prior to the white man, the land was owned by the entire population. You didn't own a single plot of land. The land couldn't be owned according to most Native American ideals. The land belonged to everybody. You can't own land. And that's a very different perspective for them. And the Dawes Act basically said you no longer have the rights as a tribe. The land is owned severalty. That means that it's owned individually by individual people, this allotment, which kind of affected the Native Americans in a lot of different ways. So we've got the allotment, making that not tribal lands. We've got the protection of the U.S. laws. Of course, that's going to change some things since they weren't used to the laws of the United States. And it also changes this idea of who can be a tribal member. And there becomes this disconnect between the purebloods and the mixed race people. So allotment of land, this is how they broke it up here. To each head of family, 1/4 of a section. To each single person over 18 years of age, 1/8 of a section, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically saying that we're going to give you guys land. That sounds great, right? And in some ways, that sounds pretty awesome to be able to just get land just for getting on these rolls. But like I said, this really ends that idea of this communal lands, this idea that all the lands are owned by all the people and not just by an individual. So now we end up with lands that are owned by one individual or one family instead of the whole tribe sharing the property. Very different perspective. It's a very different way of looking at things. And then by 1911, there are these ads saying that these Indian lands are for sale. So the government could take the lands that had not been allotted because some of the tribal members chose not to become part of those rolls. Since they did not get on the rolls, they didn't get a piece of land. Now they don't own the land, and now there's less land for the natives. So they started selling off what was tribal land to white farmers in order to get the land farmed. And if you look, some of these prices are pretty cheap. Here in Oregon, the property here was going for $15.43 an acre. Which today's prices, that would be insane, right? Getting an acre of land for $15.43. So we also get this disconnect between the purebloods and the mixed race. This idea of pure blood, the purer your blood, the more a member of a tribe you are. The less blood you have, you get less rights. And no, the other way around. You actually, according to the government, you got more rights because you were mixed race. So like the purebloods at that point in time, if you were a pureblood Indian, the Dawes Act basically said that that the land was owned partially by you and partially by the government for a certain period of time. And the government was basically overseeing to make sure that you were able to take care of it. But if you were a mixed race, if you had any white blood, then you could just take the land and it was yours. So there became this real disconnect between the purebloods and the mixed race that is still really going on today. And that's where we get that term, the $5 Indian, that I'll get to in just a moment. Oh, there's my slide about the $5 Indian. So what is a $5 Indian? One of the things that happened was, that people are not honest. Generally, people are, but there are always some people that aren't honest and some people that are going to take advantage of a system. And one of the systems that was taken advantage of was this Allotment Act. So basically white people would see that there were these lands being given away to the Indians. So they'd go and they'd talk to the Dawes Act the person that's taken the rolls, and they would say, well, I know I'm not really an Indian, but what can I do to become an Indian so I can get this land? And the person on the rolls would say $5. And here's a $5 coin, $5 gold coin. Give this $5 gold coin, and bam, you're an Indian. You're on the rolls, and now you get some land. And so a lot of the tribes are filled with people that really weren't tribal members. There's no idea, no way to really say how many of these people that were put on the rolls were really Indians, and how many of them were just getting onto the rolls. So we get this another disconnect there. And nowadays, $5 Indian is considered a slur to put somebody down. And oftentimes, somebody who just doesn't have dark enough skin is considered a $5 Indian. And we get this major disconnect. And then we get really dark-skinned Indians, particularly those that come from Africa. And we have a lot of people that during the slave trade came from Africa. They got out of slavery, became part of the tribe. So they have really dark skin. And we get some people who are like, those are the only true Indians because they have to have the dark skin. So we get a lot of this real disconnect between who is an Indian and who isn't, based on this idea that they have to own land. So how do you become a citizen? Does anybody know how you become a citizen here in the United States or in Oregon or in your city? So to become a citizen of your city or your state, pretty much all you have to do is live there for a certain period of time. To become a citizen of, as this picture shows, France, I'm an American. If I were to become a citizen of France, I'd follow what the French government says is my expectation to become a French citizen. Here, one way is to be born into it. Yes, that is one way to become a citizen, is to be born into it. And another way is to take a test. If you're not here, if you're not born into being a citizen, you can take a test, and every government, every organization, every government in every state and every nation has their own regulations for how to become a citizen. And it could be that you take some test. It could be that you have to jump through these other hoops. It could just be that you've lived there for a certain amount of time. But Native Americans, they are considered a nation, but they don't have the full rights of a nation. Each tribe is considered a tribal nation. They have their own constitution, but the federal government has mandated how you can become a citizen of the tribe. And it's based on being born into it. The only way to become a citizen of a Native American tribe is to be born into it. That's what the government says. And if you're too far from it, for instance, say that you're, in my case, my grandfather's grandfather was a tribal member. My grandfather could have been a tribal member. I'm not sure if he was or not, but he could have been. My mom could not. I cannot, because I'm too far removed from that. You also get the protection of the laws of the United States. Now, this is starting to change. You still have the protection and laws of the United States within the nations, the Native American nations. But notice my translation, you can't govern yourself. That's basically what they meant, is that you no longer get to govern yourself. The United States government is going to be governing you and making sure that you're following the laws of the United States. Now we are getting away from that a little bit, and the tribes are now starting to be able to govern themselves more. They actually can have their own courts now, and they can have their own ways of governing themselves and following their own regulations, their own rules. And I like that. Protection like gangsters provide protection. Basically, yeah. Yeah. All right. So basically, to be a tribal member, like I said, you have to be on those rolls. You have to be born into it. You can't, you have to be born into it. You can't just take a test like you can here in the United States to become a member of the United States government. Or not a member of the government, a citizen of the United States. You knew what I meant. So, does it matter? Does this really matter? Do we need it? It's getting better, so does it matter? Why does this matter? It matters because the nations, the Native American nations, yeah, it's getting a little better. Yeah, they're able to govern themselves, but understanding this past, understanding what happened at that point in time, understanding how things have played out because of these basically malicious acts. It was an act of the government, but it was kind of malicious. They had the intention of taking the Native American lands when these acts. There's more than one of them, but the Dawes Act was the big one that came about. All these different acts were put in there to control the Native Americans. Prior to this, their control was basically genocide, basically an attempt to kill them, make fewer of the Native Americans take their land and whatnot by force. Now they're changing things up, and they're trying to take their lands more by law. So, but it's still taking their lands. It's still taking their culture, telling them that their culture doesn't matter, that their way of living doesn't matter. And we want to avoid doing that to other cultures. At least I do. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. I'd love to know if you guys have any questions. And while you guys type up any questions you may have, I'm going to show off my website address there. I do have a website that I am building. There's not a whole lot there yet, but it's Super Queer History, and I'm going to be building up more on that as time goes on. Currently, it's a repository for where I'm collecting primary source documents and secondary source documents about different queer people in history, so that I can make more presentations like this. And I'm going to be doing 2 more. I've got 2 more planned right now, presentations, and my plan is to do these once a month. So I'm sure I'll have more coming up past that. Thank you, Heather. Was there pushback from tribes in against this legislation? Was there pushback from the tribes against the legislation? Not as much as there could have been. I'm sure there was some, but they were pretty beaten down by this point. Many of the tribes in Oklahoma had been marched across the Trail of Tears from southwestern southeastern United States, the Georgia, Alabama area, the Creek and the Cherokee, the Choctaw, a few other tribes were force marched from that area to Oklahoma. And now it's just a continuation of that kind of thing. So they were already pretty badly beaten. Unfortunately, I don't think there was as much. There was fight against it, but a lot of the fight was by saying, okay, fine, you do this, I'm not going to sign up on the rolls. A lot of people just didn't sign up on the rolls, which is bully for them, but now they're not tribal members. And that's one of the disconnects that we get with that $5 Indian is they're on the rolls, so are they a real Indian? Or are the ones that did not get on the rolls, are they the real Indians? All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions right now. Thank you guys very much. Oh, I see another one coming in here. Any white people that didn't want this, or were they mostly just complicit? I haven't seen any evidence of really anybody, white or otherwise, fighting against it back then. There wasn't really this concept of civil rights that we're used to today. The Civil Rights Acts hadn't come about yet. And so we really don't see a whole lot of that back then. We still had, yeah, not that I've seen, basically. I could be missing something. And if anybody watching the recording knows better, please put it in the comments. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming. I'm glad everybody came. I had a great time doing this, and I'll be doing this for a while. I'll be doing it once a month. I hope to be able to work up to more, but for now, it's going to be once a month. Have a good day.